Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Friday, June 19th, 2026, episode 525. What do I say to a groom just before the wedding starts? Okay, so uh usually I would save this bit for a groom just before a wedding, but it's come up several times recently, and so I thought I'd just make an episode out of it anyway. But the reason why this is important, what I say to a groom, is because after you get married or once you commit, see, it's different. If you don't get married, if you don't somehow formalize your relationship, well, then you can just walk away at any given moment, right? There's no legal uh, repercussions. There's no strings that have to be detached and somehow unattached. In other words, who owns what, who gets what, all of that stuff becomes something you have to deal with. And lawyer fees to get a divorce is extremely high. Last time I checked, it was like $20,000 to file all the paperwork, etc. So it costs a lot. And so once you get married or have a legally binding uh, arrangement, then the fighting gets a lot worse. It gets more intense. And that's because it's not so easy to run away. You can't just simply walk away from the relationship and just take your stuff and go home. No, there are legal repercussions. So, because of that barrier to exit, the stakes become a lot higher. The fights become and the arguments become more intense. You know each other's buttons, you know what gets the other person upset. So you're tired, they're bothering you, they're annoying you, they're calling out your faults and flaws. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And so retaliation becomes really easy. You could hurt the other person very, very easily if you wanted to, and if that's the kind of game that you're going to be playing. Now, a lot of people will give you cliches and say things like, oh, happy wife, happy life. But what about the husband? What about the relationship as a whole? And this whole happy wife, happy life thing ignores any kind of significant, deep issues that need to be resolved. Plus, if the wife also knows you're functioning with a happy wife, happy life rubric or mentality, then you'll get manipulated. And over time, the husband or whoever's getting manipulated is going to start resenting it. So in the beginning, it's easy to say, oh, no, it's okay. I love you, whatever. But over time, resentment is going to grow. And unless you know how to deal with it, um, it's going to be a serious problem. So you want to live by a solid principle that both of you have to abide by or submit to. And, for me, it's really easy, faith in Jesus Christ. And if you heard any of my preaching, then you know what I mean by that. Hypocrisy is a big part of that principle. And so, as long as you make it clear and as long as you both agree that this is, in fact, how you're going to resolve differences and resolve issues that come up in life, then, hey, no biggie. That's what you're always going to fall back on eventually. And the more that it becomes a part of your life, well, you know, that's it becomes a no-brainer. So this is mostly from a guy's perspective, but I do say this to women as well. But once you realize how a woman communicates, generally speaking, stereotypically speaking, racially speaking, um, and you understand her cycles and her moods and all that kind of stuff, then you realize that sometimes, a lot of times, uh, when they seem angry, they're just venting. They're not angry with you. They're not asking you to solve a problem. They just want you to listen. And guys do that too. We do it a little bit differently, generally speaking, stereotypically speaking. But there's venting, and no one is, and what you don't want to have happen, which happened to me a lot in the beginning, is you misunderstand the venting as anger being directed to you. So, all the bad habits that a person had growing up, especially women, the bad habits they learned from manipulating their fathers, manipulating other boys, all of that stuff, you got to learn how that is and maybe try to get that person to stop doing it, right? Stop the manipulation. If you want something, then just say it. You got to call it out, in other words, unless you like it. But to me, anyway, it gets really old really quickly. But if it's an argument, and here's where I get to the part where that I share with a groom right before the wedding. But if you get into an argument, right, and like I said, after you cross that line, it gets really intense. A lot of people are surprised that once you tie the knot, once you make that legally binding arrangement, whatever it might be, a wedding or marriage is the most common way that you would seal the deal. But once you get into an argument over what's the right way or the right choice, the destination or a method or a way of doing things, um, you are going to fight. No, it's not, that's wrong. You have to do it this way. And so you get into a kind of an argument, and depending on how much resentment and baggage that you've built up in the relationship, it all begins to come out, right? So the way to get out of that situation is to find a better way. Have to find a way to uh, keep both sides happy. In other words, a way that makes both people happier than if they just simply uh, was like it was decided that they were right. Like you win the argument, right? So you feel good, but the other person doesn't, right? And so you want a situation where both are going to feel better. And some people might want to, and depending on the situation, and you can be flexible depending on the situation, depending on what you're arguing about. So you can divide domains or territories, like, for example, something minor. I do my own laundry. She does the laundry for everybody. My wife does the laundry for everybody else in the house, but I do my own laundry. Uh, and I let her clean the dishes the way that she wants, but when I do the dishes, I do it the way I want, right? This kind of thing is pretty easy. But when we're talking about right and wrong, what to buy, how to save, what should our attitude be towards a group of people, whatever, then you have to find something better. What you don't want to do is you don't want to start keeping score. And I've heard people do this. In my over the years of my life, I've heard people say that they keep score, right? And so, hey, you won last time, it's my turn to win. So you take turns being right. Of course, there's a problem with that because you know that you don't really care that much for this. So you're going to make it a big deal to make it seem like it's their turn to be right. And so they take that turn, but the next one is going to be really serious and meaningful to you. And so you want to position yourself so that it goes your way. It's your turn next time, right? And so this becomes really a horrible situation where you're not really trying to get along or facilitate things, but you're just manipulating the situation to get what you want. The worst of all, however, is compromise. And I said this one recently to a group of men who go to church, and a couple of eyebrows were raised, like, what do you mean compromise is the worst? Compromise is what we all do. You give a little, she gives a little, and everyone is equally unhappy. No, I reject that, um, because this is not. No one gets what they want. No one is happy. Why, how is this a good thing? So that's why I always say find something better that makes you both happier, not a little bit happy and a little bit sad, but both of you happier. It's like a financial transaction. It doesn't happen until both of you are happy, or both of you believe that you're getting a good deal. And in order to find this other third option, you have to get creative. And for this to happen, sometimes you have to bring about change in your own life. Some of us, we don't like to change. We don't like to sort of bend to the demands of other people, but it's just for the sake of the relationship. And so maybe you have to change. You don't want to be that guy that says, only God can judge me. And I have an episode on that, I think, where a lot of guys used to get that tattooed on their body somewhere. Only God can judge me, as if to say, I'm never going to change. Don't ever try to make me change. If we get into an argument, I'm never going to bend. I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to try to even understand your point of view. I'm right. I'm always right. And God can judge me. You know, you don't want to be that guy. Because really what that means is I don't want to grow, I don't want to learn anymore, I don't want to change, and this is a person you definitely want to stay away from. And also, you want to find that out before you get married, especially if you're a guy, you want to figure out if you're that kind of person before you commit to a relationship, because it will eventually become a deal breaker. And in the episode that I talked about this, I laughed about it with a guy who had it tattooed across his chest in giant letters. So you want to find out sooner than later. But this approach, as I said, means that you both have to grow. It's not just a husband thing. It's not just a wife thing. But in order to find that third option, because once you start doing it, both of you will do it, right? That'll become the default attitude. I'm speaking from experience, actually. But, and this means that you're both going to grow. Your relationship grows, your maturity, your spirituality, your intellect, and you grow together. This is what's really important. You grow together instead of growing apart. So, to recap what I just said, after you make that serious commitment, you can't run away. And so the burden or the barrier to exit is much, much higher. And so more is at stake. And so you have to figure out how to make things work. And instead of allowing things to fall apart, for you to grow distant, for you to say things like, oh, what is it? We grew out of love, or we lost the spark, you want to grow together, right? And, you know, if you are abiding by the same principle, then what happens is you grow together. The mental aspect, or one might call the spiritual aspect of your relationship, can either enhance or ruin everything else. And that's it. So that's usually what I say. And I say, don't ever forget that. And we go out and we have the wedding. uh, yeah. But this is food for thought. This episode is just food for thought. As I said, ideas are starting points. It's a reference point. It's just a subjective perspective on things that you can modify, you can tweak, you can adjust as needed according to where you are in life, according to your spirituality, whatever. But it's an idea that's thrown out there, and you can use it and make it your own. But that's it. Quick episode today. Something that came to mind to me last night, and so I thought I'd share with you today. So I will talk to you either next week for my regular episode or on Sunday for Jesus Day. So until then, peace.